Welcome to the Director's Chair podcast. I'm your host, Basil Sharp, and with me is my co-host, Sky Boyer.
Hi, hello, it's me.
Sky, how you doing?
I We live in a dark time, but I'm pushing on the best I can by not indulging in any movies because apparently I spend my time doing nothing fun.
Well, that's a way to enjoy this lovely quarantine we find ourselves in. But anyways, this podcast, as you all know, is about the finer workings of filmmaking, with focus being specifically on directors. I want to give you an in-depth discussion about various types of directors and how their work has impacted the film scene as a whole. Today we're talking about my personal favorite director, Christopher Edward Nolan. Born July 30th, 1970, he is a British-American filmmaker who is known for making personal, distinctive films within the Hollywood mainstream. His 10 films have grossed over $4.7 billion worldwide and garnered a total of 34 Oscar nominations and 10 wins. Born and raised in London, Nolan developed an interest in filmmaking from a young age. After studying English literature at University College London, he made his feature debut with The Following in 1998. Nolan gained international recognition with his second film, Memento, in 2000, for which he was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. He transitioned from independent to studio filmmaking with Insomnia in 2002, and found further critical and commercial success with the Dark Knight trilogy from 2005 to 2012. He had The Prestige in 2006 and Inception in 2010, which received 8 Oscar nominations, by the way, including one for Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay. This was followed by the science fiction film Interstellar in 2014 and the war film Dunkirk in 2017, the latter of which earned him Academy Award nominations for Best Picture and Best Director. Just a couple of quick anecdotes about Nolan. Nolan is one of the driving creative directors that have influenced me in a major way. His films are all, in my opinion, pretty much classics. I don't think that there is a objectively bad Nolan film. He brings his style, it's very, it's very distinct. It's very in the forefront of his movies. It's very recognizable, I should say, in a similar way to Tarantino, where you can tell it's a Nolan film. It always has something to do with manipulating time through editing, or some movies just straight up it's just time travel in an extent with Interstellar. And then he also is a huge fan of nonlinear storytelling, which is something I really do appreciate, because it kind of keeps you on your toes and it makes you think. And in my opinion, I respect a director who respects me and my intelligence as as an audience member, and doesn't think I'm just some kind of dumb person who needs to have my plot spoon fed to me over the course of the film. I know you have a little bit differing opinions on Nolan than I do, so why don't you share those now, Sky?
Oh boy. So I have not seen every single one of Nolan's films, but I've seen a large majority. I did see the Dark Knight trilogy. I saw Memento when I was in. I mentioned in the podcast a couple times that I've seen a bunch of films as a result of my time in a film as lit class to examine how we move things from literature to film. And one of the movies that we were shown was Memento because of the way it's told. Because you mentioned non-linear storytelling. That whole movie is literally storytelling in a non-linear way. Yeah. And it all comes together in a way that feels linear, but it's not, if you get what I mean by that. I have seen Interstellar. I don't have an opinion on it. I think it's. I also have seen Inception. I have seen The Prestige. I've not seen The Following or Insomnia, so I don't know anything about those two.
Yeah, The Following is the only one of his movies I actually haven't seen.
Okay, yeah, my opinion of Nolan is much different. I think he's good, mind you. I think he's a good director. I can clearly see he has a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? He has a lot of respect for what he creates.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's the thing. There's something to be said that a director can totally make something but not respect their art form.
That's true.
And that's something I find very, very important, because you have to have respect for the medium. You have to respect it. You have to understand why it is what it is. You have to understand the appeal of it. You have to see where you got to understand film.
Yeah.
And I can tell Nolan does. There's a lot of integrity to the way he films. I can tell he doesn't compromise.
Yeah.
It's something that's just not in how he is. He literally, when he was given that bigger budget, once he started getting bigger budget for films, because he became more well known, he started making landmarks. You could see the change. Like Inception is a crazy, from a technical standpoint, the movie is incredible.
Yeah.
Whether or not I agree with it being a fantastic, groundbreaking Oscar nomination film, I think it's kind of blowing wind a bit.
Yeah.
That's something that I have a problem with Nolan.
But yeah.
Consistently, I feel like he's someone who kind of blows smoke to the point where it's like the scripts in his films are a little grandiose to the point of being grandiose for the sake of it.
Yeah, but we'll get into all of that after our script read part. This was just kind of general thoughts. Sorry, I wasn't trying to interrupt you because I like what you're saying, but we're gonna still have a chance to dive deep into all that.
All right, we'll dive deep in a bit then. But yeah, basically, I have a lesser opinion of Nolan than Basil does for sure. I don't think he's the best director ever. I think he's good though. I do think he's good. Yeah. He's got visions, which is so important, especially because the other guy we're gonna talk about has visions too. Like,
yeah.
I love our next director too.
So, yeah, those are just some quick thoughts from us about Nolan, and we're going to jump right into our famous scene read segments. This time reading a scene from a very small movie from him called The Dark Knight. Let's just jump right into this, as Philip DeFranco would say.
Gordon stands, moves to the Joker, undoes his handcuffs. Gordon.
If we're going to play games, I'm going to need a cup of coffee.
The Joker.
The good cop, bad cop routine?
Gordon.
Not exactly.
Gordon steps out. The overhead lights come on. Batman is behind him. The Joker blinks in the harsh white light. Wham! The Joker's face hits the table. Comes up for air. Crack, crack, to the head. Batman is in front of him. The Joker stares, fascinated, bleeding. The Joker.
Never start with the head. Victim gets fuzzy. Can't feel the next.
Crack. Batman's fist smacks down on the Joker's fingers. The Joker.
See?
Batman.
You wanted me, here I am.
The Joker.
I wanted to see what you'd do, and you didn't disappoint. Ha 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 ha. You let 5 people die. Then you let Dent take your place. Even to a guy like me, that's cold.
Batman.
Where's Dent?
The Joker.
Those mob fools want you gone, so they can get back to the way things were. But I know the truth. There's no going back. You changed things. Forever.
Batman.
Then why do you want to kill me?
The Joker starts laughing. After a moment, he's laughing so hard it sounds like sobbing. The Joker.
Kill you? I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you? Go back to ripping off mob dealers? No, you complete me.
Batman.
You're garbage who kills for money.
The Joker.
Don't talk like one of them. You're not. Even if you'd like to be. To them, you're a freak. Like me. They need you now.
He regards Batman with something approaching pity. The Joker.
But as soon as they don't, they'll cast you out. Like a leper.
The Joker looks into Batman's eyes, searching. The Joker.
Their morals? Their code? It's a bad joke. Dropped on the first sign of trouble. They're only as good as the world allows them to be. You'll see. I'll show you. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve.
Batman grabs the Joker and pulls him upright. The Joker continued. Observation Room, MCU, Gotham Central. Night, one of the detectives moves for the door. Gordon stops him. Gordon.
He's in control.
Interior Interrogation Room, MCU, Gotham Central. Night. Batman hoists the Joker up by the neck. Batman.
Where's Dent?
The Joker.
You have these rules, and you think they'll save you.
Batman.
I have one rule.
The Joker.
Then that's the one you'll have to break, to know the truth.
Batman.
Which is?
The Joker.
Read that. The only sensible way to live in this world is without rules. Tonight, you're going to break your one rule.
Batman leans in to the Joker. Batman.
I'm considering it.
The Joker.
There are just minutes left, so you'll have to play my little game if you want to save one of them.
Batman.
Them?
The Joker.
For a while, I thought you really were dead, the way you threw yourself after her.
Batman drops the Joker, rips up a bolted down chair. End scene.
Man, this scene sure doesn't have the same kind of appeal when we're reading it, does it?
Not at all. I was actually, I've been watching a ton of Star Trek, so I was kind of channeling Data.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was a little like, okay, I don't think this is quite what I expected.
A different take on. Who says I can't win an Academy Award for this this performance? Anyone with a mind. Anyways, let's get into our thoughts about in a more detailed manner regarding the films of Sir Christopher. Well, I actually don't know that he's a knight, so
Is he? I don't think he's a sir yet.
I don't think so. I mean, he's who can say really?
Who could say?
But I'll ask you first. Then, what is your favorite Nolan film? As somebody who's not necessarily the biggest fan of Nolan.
Probably Memento. Definitely, it's either Memento or The Prestige.
So why would you say Memento? Like, why is that the first one that came to your mind?
The first, all right, mainly because the way it's told is so bizarre. Memento is told from, I guess, spoilers?
Yeah,
it's told from
spoilers.
The end, technically, from a timeline standpoint. And then the film actively shifts between the beginning and the end of the film. Or, like, its starting point is at the end. But then you go to the beginning of the film, timeline-wise, and then you slowly work your way into the middle. And it's the strangest film as a result. I can't say I've ever seen anything that tells a story like that. Like, ever. And on top of that, the film doesn't do it incoherently. It's very coherent. You feel like you're solving a mystery, and you don't feel weirded out by it. Like, it's a very interesting film from a viewing standpoint, and this is something that carries on not only from the way it's told, but even the stylistic, like, way the film is shot. Like, you can tell that there's sort of a difference in how things are shot based upon whether or not we are in, like, further into the future than in the past. Like, it's so weird to say that, but, like, you get that feeling that you know where you're at.
Well, yeah,
based upon
it switches with black and white, right?
Yeah.
So it's jumping between, this happened before and it's in black and white, or maybe this is happening later, and like you don't really know until the end what's going on.
I think that's something that's interesting is I don't feel like mystery movies are like one of those types of films I really enjoy when you tell them interestingly. Something I really despise is when you give me like a murder mystery, or you give me something like that, and you're literally like just going to tell me the answer, and you're not going to like let me slowly watch as everything is peeled back and the mystery is like unraveled as opposed to just told. It's something that's very important. I want to compare. I want to watch Knives Out because I've heard that is a great whoudunit that you can unravel and figure out. Maybe not to. I don't know why I'm comparing these two films. Yeah. They have absolutely no comparison there. But basically, what I'm saying is Memento is a mystery, and it understands what it takes to be a mystery of a film. And The Prestige, which thankfully you introduced me to, thanks to something else, another podcast maybe, I got to experience that film for the first time. And the thing I quickly realized as I was watching it was, this is a cool film.
Oh yeah.
It's really cool. Like, the way it's told is very interesting, but it's fun on top of having that kind of like that interesting like question. So like something I realize Nolan does like conceptually with everything he does is he asks questions in his films.
Yeah.
Like even The Dark Knight, which superhero films have a notorious nature of not talking about things.
Yeah, right.
They don't talk about things. They just tell a story. Mind you, these stories can be entertaining and you can enjoy the story, but you don't get like a bigger question. And the thing about the Nolan trilogy of Batman films is it asks questions of people, which is something that I find so rarely in that kind of thing. It's why everyone acclaims this trilogy for what it is because it's willing to step out and be more than a superhero film.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you could look at Heath Ledger's The Joker as a great example. His character is surreal and chaotic and crazy, and he does it in a way that no one's captured it still. Say what you will about Joaquin Phoenix, but no one's captured that like insanity.
Well, there's this thing to it where with Heath Ledger's Joker, and it goes to the writing. I mean, obviously the performance elevates the writing, but at a certain level, like, this dude he's convincing what he's saying to, and what he's saying isn't exactly like, you can kind of understand where he's coming from about how, like, a lot of, you know, the society, gosh, but that they're living in, it's kind of, you know, it's this farce that's built up on these rules, and the second that anything hits the road, or that anything hits the, well, I'm really not, the minute that shit hits the fan, everything drops. And I mean, unfortunately, we're kind of seeing like a real time what that looks like.
Yeah,
in real life. And it's like, I mean, people band together and stuff, and the ending message of that film is that, you know, even through like adversity and through, like, you know, people can step above and, you know, rise above the base desire to just, like, you know, stab people in the back, and just look out for yourself. But like everything the Joker's saying, even up to the end, you're like, you know, this dude, he's crazy, but he kind of has a point. And like, I think that's the way a good villain should be done. But there's a way of doing it where it's subtle, like the Joker, and there's a way of doing it where it's like, I mean, for better or worse, like, I would think the only Marvel villain I can think of who's like that is Thanos, where he's like, oh, you know, but his thing doesn't really make any sense. And the issue is, like, he's not really portrayed as a crazy person, whereas that's kind of like the get out of jail free card for the Joker, right? You're like, well, even if some of the stuff he says doesn't make sense, it's fine because he's crazy.
Yeah,
but
whereas with Thanos, they play completely straight.
Yeah.
And actually, the more I go back to that, that's a great juxtaposition in the fact that, like, Thanos has literally no reason to say what he says. There's no evidence to support his perspective, actually. Like, you're you know, as a viewer, you can be like, all right, I get what the thing you're saying is, but you never get proof because Marvel movies aren't developed.
Yeah. But anyways, back to Nolan.
Yeah. That, I was just saying, this is a great example of Nolan breathes life into characters and worlds and wants to give you thought. Like, he wants you to think. I dislike Interstellar a lot. Yeah. I really,
we'll get to, because my next question is going to be, what are your least favorite?
Interstellar,
but I did want to say what my favorite ones were before we get there.
I'm sorry. Let me reiterate that. Cut that. I got angry. I said a bad word. Bleep me out.
Anyways, so my favorite Nolan movies are, when it comes down to it, I mean, Dark Knight is definitely up there. It's hard to kind of pick. And so I would say there's three of them that are like my peak favorite Nolan films, and it's The Dark Knight, The Prestige, and Inception. Which we'll get into in a second, but the reason that, because we're going to talk about the stuff that we dislike about his movies in a minute, I want to talk about the good stuff I appreciate about Inception, and I'm going to bring up Interstellar in a second. But Inception, the reason I love that film so much, and it's another one of those films that's kind of told in a very, like, nonlinear fashion, and there's different things going on, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of a heist film, and the vault is somebody's brain, and that's like, it's a different take on a heist film. There's like a sense of kind of wonder and awe in that film that, like, and I've noticed this in a lot of Nolan's film, even like the final speech that Hugh Jackman gives at the end of Prestige about, like, if you can just make people have wonder even for a second, then it was all worth it. And that's something that I think Nolan, like, kind of captures in even his darker movies, is this kind of sense of wonder and awe. And, like, it's most notable to me in Interstellar and Inception as the two examples, because, like, I mean, obviously you're dealing with some heavy sci-fi, like dreams, like this whole landscape flipping over, and this really interesting subject matter, or space and like black holes. And I mean, they had to get an astrophysicist to design what a black hole actually looks like, and like do a bunch of research for Interstellar, so they could, like, that's actually what a black hole looks like. It, like, pays respect to, like, the way actual time moves in space, and the way if you're going at light speed, how now you're going faster than everybody else, and like if you get out of that light speed and then you're back to normal speed, then people are going to be way behind you, like or way ahead of you in years, because that's how space works. It's relative. But yeah, there's this just sense of like, I'm trying to show you something kind of unbelievable, but in the back of your head, you know it's fake, and that's back to The Prestige. That's why I love The Prestige so much, is because like obviously you go into the trick and you know it's a trick, but that's not the point. Like it's not about whether or not it's real or not. It's about whether or not even for a second you're like, man, this is insane. Like I can believe this. I also love like the heart in his movies. A lot of directors I feel like either go for like, I mean, and I know Interstellar receives a lot of criticism for being a little bit cheesy. It's like, oh, love and stuff, but I don't know. I kind of felt it as being pretty sincere. And sometimes that's how it is. Like sometimes the sincere stuff is the cheesy stuff, but like there's an argument to be made against that. But Inception for me, like, I mean, the funny thing about Inception though is I think like the least spectacular part of it is like, because I think any actor could have played the main character in that movie. Like Leonardo DiCaprio, he's a fantastic actor, but like I didn't see the need for him in that movie.
I 100% agree on that. In fact, like that's one of the things about, I think that's why I don't like Inception very much, is I don't feel like connected to characters. Like I get the appeal of like the heist in a mind thing. It's trippy, it's interesting, but then I'm like, but I don't care about anyone in this movie. And that was my main complaint about Inception, is I don't feel any ties to what's going on. Yeah, and I don't really feel a sense of, I'm sorry, I'm detracting from what you like.
I'm going to get into it now. Let's kind of get into the ones we dislike, or the aspect of his films we dislike, or which movies specifically. You can go first because you seem to have been holding this in.
I really dislike Inception. Inception is probably my least favorite movie he's made, which is, I know everyone, there's a lot of people who absolutely adored Inception. I remember sitting down watching Inception with my family, and the reaction we all had was, we came away being like, what did we just watch? What did we gain from this? And I went back and I would watch it later on, and I find myself asking the same question. I don't really truly know what I gained from watching it. And now this is interesting because Memento is a movie that is told in a stylistically bizarre way as well. Yet I can't, like, I get the appeal of Inception's overall story, and I see what they're trying to do with the character growth, or maybe not growth.
It is character growth. I mean, because at the end he gets his family, and it's a matter of like him accepting his wife's death, and at the end he accepts his wife's death, and that's why it's like, was him not being able to see his children, was that like a dream that he couldn't enter unless he accepted his wife's death, or was it real life at the end? That's kind of, and when you get into the ambiguity of it all, and you're like, oh, okay, so was he in a dream? Wasn't he in a dream?
I love ambiguity in movies, but the thing is Inception, it goes so many layers to try and start to make you question what's real, what's not, what's in the mind, it starts going so deep that I feel like I'm going down a rabbit hole. And this is something that I don't want to say I have the same problem with Interstellar, but sometimes I get that same vibe with Interstellar, is that I feel like Nolan wants to take us down these rabbit holes and give us this kind of surreal experience that you can't get anywhere else, a la the black hole experience, which is, mind you, fantastic, interesting, thought-provoking. But also, why you gotta go down so many rabbit holes all the time? And this is something that kind of pervades how I feel about Nolan in general, is while I say I appreciate him asking these questions, sometimes, again, I feel you're asking them and going a little too grandiose. Like you're trying to sort of gaze up at the sky and you're like, why does everything in this universe exist at this one? Like, I guess my problem is that it feels not preachy, mind you. Preachy is completely different. What it feels like is he's asking questions and then he just goes too broad, and sometimes it spreads out too much. And this is a consistent
narrowing down.
Yeah, you can ask narrow. That's why I like Memento. Memento has a question that you want to answer, and you want to see how it all comes about, and it's concise. And I feel like the problem with Inception and Interstellar is they're not as concise as they should be.
So I agree
have a
with
problem.
that for Interstellar. My biggest issue, like with Nolan as director on whole, is he does sometimes kind of like lose track with pacing. For me, his worst film is The Dark Knight Rises, and the biggest issue with that movie is the pacing is all over the place.
It is.
Um,
There's also a lot of threads in The Dark Knight Rises that are just kind of like pew 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 pew.
yeah, exactly. And
And,
the
yeah,
issue pervades with Interstellar. I agree. That's my biggest issue with that movie too. Is the pacing's kind of just like there's a whole section beginning. You're just like, okay, there's something to be said about quickly establishing your world so we can get to the story. And in Interstellar, it's like now we'll spend like an hour on a farm before we actually get to anything. Which is like why Interstellar for me is definitely on the lower end of like his films. Even though I there's like to me Interstellar is kind of like a walnut or something. It's got a hard exterior. You kind of have to get through to find the good stuff in it.
okay.
But it definitely has some very big structural issues, especially with pacing. And audio issues it had when it released in theater.
I'm not gonna blame the audio issues though on Nolan and his team
Yeah.
because that just sounds like someone goofed it
Yeah.
rather than like an actual problem with the film itself. I'm glad you said pacing because pacing is something that's like very important for a movie. If a movie drags too much or something is not given enough time to breathe, it can immediately like detract. And again, Nolan is someone who asks questions, and the problem is if your pacing is bad and you're asking broad questions, you lose track of where you
Right.
are.
And it's like you
And
don't want the audience to forget what question was being asked.
Yeah, it's The Last Jedi all over again.
Oh gosh. Well, that's not. But, well, that's the thing. And here's the thing. I love long form science fiction. Like Blade Runner 2049, I think is a perfect example of like how to execute like pacing in a long form style. And I think Nolan's achieved that before with some of his other films. Like I mean, something like The Prestige. I think Inception actually is well paced too because it kind of keeps moving. When you look at something like Blade Runner 49, it's a slower movie and it gives its ideas like room to breathe, but it brings up new ideas and then gives those room to breathe and brings up new ideas. And there's something where I think Christopher Nolan will have a tendency to kind of dwell a little too much on one specific idea, or he'll bring up an idea and won't really talk about it for like the next 30-45 minutes of the film and then get back to it later, where that's where you kind of like, okay, maybe the script was losing track a little bit and you're like your themes were kind of being lost as you were delving into the minutia of the film. With something like Interstellar, it's like, oh, you have a lot to kind of go through, like, oh, here's some cool like this is a unique looking spaceship that's almost believable, and but you're forgetting, okay, what are the themes here? What is this movie about? You know, I mean, I get it, it's a sci-fi, we're trying to find a new place for humans to settle, but what's at the heart of this film? And that's something that I think like he does. That's a valid criticism where he loses track of his themes a little bit when he's delving into the minutia of his films.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important. I think that's a good way to put it. To kind of sum up my issues with, I don't like the concept of diving into details and then just that's the thing. Filmmaking is, I think, at its strongest when you know what you're trying to do and you don't deviate too much. Like being broad is a dangerous thing. Unless like you're a master filmmaker who can do that. I'm trying to think of someone that can do that.
Well, I think Nolan's achieved it, but in some of his other films.
Which films? I'd like to.
Well, I would say Inception, but you would disagree.
I think it's wrapped around its own concepts a little too heavy. Like I said, I feel like it loses track of what exactly it wants to do. I get the end. At the end of it, I can see where I see it. I guess this is maybe I'm just not smart enough to comprehend it.
You're just too dumb to understand.
I'm too dumb.
Yep. You just.
I'm
it's like
watching too many Marvel movies.
It's Batman v Superman all over again. You're too dumb to understand it.
Oh god.
Zack Snyder had a master plan. That's kind of all we have time for with Christopher Nolan today, though. But yeah, like any last kind of words you want to say about him?
He is a good filmmaker. I'm not gonna don't take my criticisms as I hate the man and I think what he makes is bad. I think he's got a vision. It's just I think sometimes you need to reel it in a bit.
Yeah,
maybe that's my opinion.
I think he's one of the defining filmmakers of this generation. I appreciate that he's able to come up with original movies in a time that we're so lacking in original movies.
Oh, baby.
And we're going to
That's
get into a
true.
director in a second who also does the same thing. He specifically makes original movies, which is awesome. Yeah, so let's go to a break, and then we'll come back and we'll be talking about another British director.
In the car. I mean, that's the other thing that made it extra complicated, is that we did all of the car shots of the actors on the freeways themselves. So there's,
Oh, really? Actually, up on those roadways. So
Yes.
no green screen.
there's only
looking at the
tiny
real
bits of green
backgrounds.
screen, like in a couple of places we did some little green screen pickups, but I'd say like 90% of it is in camera. And I think you can tell because like the sort of,
Yeah.
you know, you can just see the rigs are sort of shuddering in such a way that you just, and also the actors are reacting in a different way.
Yeah.
'Cause I think the thing is when you get green screen car acting, people are like overacting.
Yeah.
They're going, but if it's really happening, they are concentrating on what they're doing.
Welcome back. That soundbite was from an interview between Christopher Nolan and our next topic, Edgar Wright. Edgar Howard Wright was born April 18th, 1974. He's an English director, screenwriter, and producer. Recognized as an auteur, he is famous for his fast-paced and kinetic satirical genre films, which feature extensive reliance on music, tracking Steadicam shots, dolly zooms, and a signature editing style that includes transitions, whip pans, and wipes. He began making independent short films before making his first feature film, A Fistful of Fingers, in 1995. Wright created and directed the comedy series Asylum in 1996, written with David Williams, after directing several other television shows. Wright directed the sitcom Spaced from 1999 to 2001, which aired for 2 series and starred frequent collaborators Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. In 2004, Wright directed the zombie comedy Shaun of the Dead, starring Simon Pegg and Frost again in the first film in Wright's Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy. The film was co-written with Pegg, as were the next 2 entries in the trilogy. The buddy cop film Hot Fuzz in 2007, and the science fiction comedy The World's End in 2013. In 2010, Wright co-wrote and directed the action comedy film Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which was his first American film. It's an adaptation of the graphic novel series. His latest film, the action film Baby Driver, was released in 2017 before filming commenced on his next feature, Last Night in Soho, which comes out in 2020, assuming the world doesn't actually completely end. Quick thoughts about Wright before we get into the scene read, Scott?
So Edgar Wright, he's without going too deep, I really like Edgar Wright because he's willing to make things that are fun and stupid. Like,
Well,
if you get what I mean before I say that, I don't mean stupid.
Yeah.
I mean stupid. Does
Yeah.
this make sense? Where I'm going with that?
No, yeah, I get what you're saying. Because I would never in a million years would I call an Edgar Wright film stupid, because they're all almost like so clever, it's insane. They're still very, like, I mean, they're dumb. A lot of the comedy is, but that's the point. It's intentional.
Yeah, there's something to be said when you, as a director, can understand the difference between what makes stupid funny and what makes stupid stupid.
Yeah.
And why you can poke fun at stupid being stupid. And I think this is a great example in stuff like Shaun of the Dead. Hot Fuzz, I think I've seen it.
Oh man,
I'm hoping I've seen Hot Fuzz.
I hope you have.
'Cause I know it's so good.
Hot Fuzz might be his best movie.
I always hear how excellent it is, and I feel like I've seen it. I know I've seen World's End, and I like World's End as well.
World's End is good.
It's good. I like Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I know a lot of people are like, it got memed on kind of when it came out.
I love
like
Scott
it a lot.
Pilgrim versus the World.
Same. I think that right there says enough to be like, I know I've heard of all of his films, except for maybe Fistful of Fingers. I don't think I know anything about that film.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it either.
It really says something when I see Edgar Wright, and this will sum up my entire thought on him. If I see his name on a movie, I expect something interesting. That's basically as much as I can say without like getting too deep.
Yeah, he's a director that when you see his name, you know you're going to have a good time regardless of the film. And it's not a Marvel movie good time where you shut your brain off. It's a fun movie that rewards you for like paying attention to it and digging into it. And that's something that I appreciate from him. But yeah, we'll get into more about Edgar in our next segment after we do our scene read, which is a scene from Shaun of the Dead.
Oh yeah,
probably his most I would say one of his most... It's hard to decide what's his most famous movie. I feel like Shaun of the Dead, though, is kind of a household name, but, I mean, Baby Driver's pretty big, and, I mean, Hot Fuzz is pretty big, and, I mean, you never know. But, yeah, let's jump right into this. You will read the part of Shaun. I will read the part of Ed. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Interior lounge. Moments later, slam. A boot hits the coffee table. Ed laces. Shaun paces. Ed.
So what's the plan?
Shaun takes a deep breath. Shaun.
Right.
Cue montage. Shaun voiceover continued.
We take Pete's car, we drive over to Mom's.
Montage. Shaun and Ed driving along in Pete's car. They pull up at Barbara and Philip's and run heroically inside. Shaun voiceover continued.
We take care of Philip.
Montage. Shaun and Ed stand armed behind a zombie Philip. Shaun voiceover continued.
I'm so sorry.
Montage. Anguish. Shaun and Ed whack Philip on the head. Shaun voiceover continued.
Then we take Mom to Liz's place and wait there until this all blows over.
Montage. Shaun, Ed, and Barbara are greeted by a grateful Liz on the doorsteps. They sit inside drinking tea and eating biscuits. Back to scene. Ed.
Why do we have to go to Liz's?
Shaun.
Because we do.
Ed.
But she dumped you.
Shaun.
I have to make sure she's okay.
Ed.
Why?
Shaun.
Because I love her.
Shaun. Surprises himself. A pause. Ed.
Alright, gay. I'm not staying there, though.
Shaun.
Why not?
Ed.
If we hole up, I want to be somewhere familiar. I want to know where the exits are, and I want to be allowed to smoke.
Shaun.
Okay.
Cue montage. Shaun voiceover continued.
Take Pete's car, get Mom.
Montage. Shaun and Ed pull up at Barbara and Philip's. Shaun voiceover continued.
Deal with Philip.
Montage. They stand behind zombie Philip. Shaun voiceover continued.
I'm sorry.
Montage. Less anguish, they whack Philip. Shaun voiceover continued.
Go to Liz's, pick her up, and then come back here and wait for it all to blow over.
Montage. Shaun, Ed, and Barbara arrive at Liz's. Shaun carries Liz to her car. They pull up at the house. They sit drinking tea and eating biscuits. Back to scene. Ed.
Perfect.
Shaun.
Wait. We can't bring them here.
Ed.
Why not?
Shaun.
It's not exactly safe, is it?
Ed.
Yeah, and look at the state of it. There's a corpse in the living room.
Shaun.
Where's safe? Where's familiar?
Ed.
Where can I smoke?
Shaun and Ed look at each other. Ed continued. Cue montage. Shaun voiceover.
Get Mom.
Montage. Shaun and Ed screech up. Shaun voiceover continued.
Do Philip.
Montage. Shaun and Ed are in a hurry. Shaun voiceover continued.
Sorry.
Montage. Whack. Shaun voiceover continued.
Get Liz, then wait for all this to blow over in the only truly sensible and safe place there is, the Winchester.
Montage. Shaun carries Liz out. They pull up to the Winchester and are ushered in by John and Doris. They sit, drinking and eating bar snacks. Back to scene. Shaun.
How's that for a fried gold sandwich?
The TV is still on in the background. Newsreader, TV.
To recap, it is vital that you stay in your homes, make no attempt to reach loved ones, and avoid all physical contact with the assailants.
Ed.
You believe everything you hear on TV?
Shaun flicks the TV off. End scene.
You know what's funny? This is one of the few reads we've done where I still get the vibe of what's going on.
Yeah, oh man, this was so hard to transcribe into, like, because the way he writes his scripts is very, very detailed and interesting. I was, like, trying to transcribe this to make it more palatable for us to do this read, and I was like, this is a lot of work. Just kind of organizing it in a way that's easily readable. Do you know what scene that was? The montage?
Yeah, isn't that the one where they keep going over the plan over and over again?
Yeah, and they keep, like, he's like, yeah, we kill Philip, and then he's like, sorry, Philip, and then bangs him on the head with his thing.
I like the just, I'm sorry, and without the actual seeing of what's going on, it's really funny. Like, it's even funnier. than I thought it would be. Shaun of the Dead is a good movie. It's not often. I'm sorry, I'm detracting. We need to talk about.
Well, we're free to go right into. I mean,
all right,
we're just smack dab right in the middle of what our favorite. What
dab? I can dab. Yeah. Favorite Edgar Wright film, definitely. Like the thing about this is like I could see any of his films that like I really like the ones that are in the upper echelon. I could give different reasons why I think it's my favorite. I could say Scott Pilgrim versus the World because it's got this bizarre camp sort of fun storytelling thing and how it's not afraid to just be what it is. It knows it's going to be over the top and way more than it needs to be. But then Shaun of the Dead is a great kind of way of looking at that. You know, instead of something like Dawn of the Dead or something that's like, you know, it's very serious, very dramatic. Shaun of the Dead is fun. It takes the whole zombie apocalypse kind of genre and like tilts it on its head. It's like, yeah, let's have fun with it.
Well, yeah.
And then you got
about Shaun of the Dead is there's this kind of deeper layer too of like the zombie is Shaun at the beginning, right? Like he's so, you know, he's in such a routine with his work life and whatever, and like he's so uninteresting, and he's just like kind of walking through like life. Like I mean, it's very intentionally shot in a way that he's just kind of like mulling around. He's not paying attention to the world falling around him because he's just so zombified to like the world, and he's so stuck in this habit of just playing video games. And like that's the thing, his friend Nick Frost, spoilers, but at the end he becomes a zombie, and it's like, and he just plays video games with Shaun, and like that's literally the only purpose he served as a friend to him. Like that's the only way he was doing anything positive, was just playing video games with him, because otherwise he was getting in the way of Shaun's life. So it's very like, it takes that the zombie, like you said, zombie kind of genre and just flips it on its head.
It's not afraid to have fun with it. It knows what it is, and it's interesting because it can take that kind of commentary on, is your daily mundane life all that different from being a zombie?
Right.
It's something that I don't think a lot of people are willing to be like on the nose about and tell in such a fun, creative way. And I think that's something that you immediately the thing that immediately comes to mind when I think of Edgar Wright films is this is fun while also having like a kind of perspective.
Yeah.
Mind you, maybe it's not always the most subtle.
That's the thing. I want to talk about Hot Fuzz. I mean, it stinks because like you can't remember a whole lot of it, or even if
I've even seen it. Like but, I've heard about it a lot, and I know a lot of people consider it like one of their favorite films ever.
One thing that Hot Fuzz does, gosh, is it takes the like testosterone fueled action, like cop, whatever, and it completely twists it on its head by glorifying the most mundane aspects of being a cop. So like doing paperwork, all this stuff is shot like super like frenetically and fun, and like he never misses a beat, and like the main characters don't really like shoot guns until the very end because like they have to, but like the whole point of it is like, this is like what being a cop is, you know, it's the boring, it's the paperwork, that's what it is. But it's like every cop movie acts like cops are like these action stars who are jumping around doing crazy stuff, and that's what, like, there is that because it's paying homage to those movies, but it also twists it by being like, yeah, okay, we're gonna make him pulling somebody over and giving somebody a ticket like this funny, entertaining part of the movie. And it's like not funny in the way that it's just like, oh, slow and boring, and like, but funny in the way that it's hyper fast paced and super quick cuts in these. I mean, one thing that he does so well, Edgar Wright, is those fast cuts with like the close-ups. That's kind of like something he like really puts into his movies. Less so in, I'd say, Baby Driver. It's definitely all over the place in the Cornetto trilogy, which is something also to talk about, is that this is a trilogy of films. They're not sequels, like they're not the same story continued. They're just the same actors and the same directors and stuff, but they're considered a trilogy. You don't really see that all that much.
No, I wish more did that, because I like the idea that we could have the same cast but a wildly different like genre and story and all that. I like that idea a lot, and it's something that we should see more often, really, because I really like. Remind me, it's Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and was it World's End?
Yep, The World's End.
I like two of those films quite a lot. I need to watch Hot Fuzz again to remind myself if I have seen it. It's a real shame that I don't remember if I have or not.
Yeah.
feel really bad right now because, like, I feel like I've seen it. On the flip side, I have seen Baby Driver and I have seen Scott Pilgrim completely, and I remember both of those very well. I want to go back to Baby Driver because you mentioned it, and I think what you said was very important to kind of note how I feel about that film. I like it a lot, mind you. It's frenetic. I like the driving sequences. I'm not a big car person, and I don't like car chases too much, actually, in films, surprisingly. It's something I've never, like, fully understood. I appreciate the stunt drivers and all that are willing to put that effort in. The thing about Baby Driver I liked the musical kind of orientation of that film, which is something that I really hate, that I feel like a lot of the wind was taken out of Baby Driver sales as a result of how right around that time we had a lot of films that were doing that kind of like frenetic, like, let's use music to emphasize this great sequence and blah blah, if you get what I mean by that.
I think there's only a couple movies that achieved that. Well, I mean, it was after Guardians of the Galaxy did, like, having the soundtrack kind of blended in. There's only the only movies I can think of that use the music, like, for a thematic reason was Guardians of the Galaxy and Baby Driver. Every other movie's just like, I mean, like, X-Men tried to do it, and what was it? Suicide Squad.
Oh god, don't talk about that movie.
But it's like,
please.
they had no reason. They were just like, oh, this is a funny, or we'll put this song here, that's a classic. But there was no actual, like, thematic or character reason for it. Whereas in Baby Driver, I mean, in Baby Driver, almost none of the dialogue from Baby Driver is, like, words that he are saying. They're lyrics from songs. Almost all of the dialogue that he speaks out loud. He does some, like, sign language stuff with his, like, deaf foster father or whatever. Every other word he says is just kind of, like, spoken. The music is so tied into his identity. Not to mention, it's a pretty realistic depiction, I've been told by anyway, of tinnitus, that condition where you're, like, hearing ringing all the time, so you have to listen to music. I actually worked with a guy who had that condition. It's actually a lot more common than you'd think.
I don't know a whole lot about tinnitus, and I didn't really understand that whole aspect, and now I kind of appreciate that a little bit more, that it's that accurate.
Yeah, that's the thing, and it's like, the action, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of car chases either. I feel like it's very hard to do them right. There's some, like, standout examples, like The Dark Knight and Mad Max, Fury Road, and I would say Baby Driver is one of those standout examples where some of the stuff they do is, like, next level, and it's shot in a very, very, like, exciting way. Whereas then you see something like Fast and Furious, and you're like, oh gosh, a car jumping out of a building onto a plane or whatever. I don't even know at this point.
I do find it funny that, like, whenever we hear about, this is something that I feel is really important that a director has to kind of weigh in on, and it's why Baby Driver's driving sequences had me so entertained, is because I like the combination of how the music kind of fits the situation, and how the music itself also changes, and, like, you go from a softer song to a lighter song depending on the tension of the moment. And, like, the opening scene is all about that. Like, it showcases how they want to combine the music with how the character is handling the situation and the situation itself.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that that's really important. And then, like you said, you go to Fast and Furious, and people are like, oh, look how incredible it is. And it's just, like, these incredibly, like, yes, they're very impressive on a technical level, kind of, like, over the top. But there's, like, no deeper aspects to it besides, look how cool it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing, is, like, with Baby Driver, I mean, the main character, there's the thing with Edgar Wright films, is they kind of, like, they focus on the main character usually, and the side characters do their job, but the main character is kind of, like, who we're exploring and what motivates them. And in Baby Driver, Baby, he's not a super good character. Like, at his heart, he is a good guy, but he's been stuck in this life of crime, and he does kind of look for a way out, but it's kind of too late. He's already done a lot of, like, he's helped a lot of getaways, and he's been party to a lot of, like, bad stuff that's happened, and you can't kind of escape that. And that's something that I liked about the film, is it was kind of realistic. I mean, I did not think the movie was gonna end, like, I thought it was gonna end with him and the girlfriend driving away, right? That's where you think that movie ends. Like, in my head, that's the Hollywood ending. But no, he goes to jail, and then we have, like, a black and white, which, I mean, in my mind, kind of, like, is, I don't know if it's intentionally ambiguous, but I think it might be. He never really maybe gets out, and that it was in his head or whatever. Like, or you can have it the way where it's like, oh, this is a happy ending, he gets out and she waits for him. But, like, part of me is like, no, that's probably just in his head.
Yeah, I think that's, I really like that as well. I think it is an intentional ambiguity. I think Edgar Wright wanted you to think about that. All right, so there's a lot of, like, morality perspectives in Baby Driver, which I think is a very interesting kind of thing in itself, really, besides the stylistic choices and all that. There's a lot of morality. It makes you question, like, he's a getaway driver at the end of the day, and he's helping people who are horrible. They hurt people. And then, he takes up this kind of, like, I don't want to say he becomes a protagonist to their antagonist, if that makes sense. Yeah, I don't think he becomes a better person. He still, at the end of the day, did help them. And this is an active thing that he has done throughout the entire film. It makes you question, it's kind of like, there's so much to, like, unpack about that ending, because do you believe that he got out and that he's going to go have this opportunity, or do you believe he really is just thinking it up as he's sitting in a cell somewhere,
looking at a poster or whatever, listening to a
song?
Yeah, it's something that's so good. And, like, I love a cool, like, little factoid, fun fact, if you will, is that they edited that film as they were shooting it, and they edited it to the music. So a little known thing about the film industry, you never edit to a soundtrack. A soundtrack is put over the edit afterwards. The composer usually has to compose to the movie, not the other way around. Baby Driver, and there's a couple of, I think Guardians of the Galaxy might be one of the only other movies that does this, but they edited to the music. So in a way, I mean, you can even see Edgar Wright's been like of saying this, the movie is kind of a series of music videos that are all tied together with a story, but yet it works exceptionally well. Yeah, and it's something that's kind of like next level to me, where it's not, a lot of time when I recommend it to people, they're like, oh, it's just like whatever, another bank robber movie or whatever. It's like, no, there's so much more to it than just your average heist movie. Your average.
That's a really great way to put it, because I recommended it to one of my grandmothers, and they're like, oh, yay, another action flick. And then they watched it and they're like, this is a good movie. And I was like, yeah, it's got a lot more going on than just it's plain old action. She's like, yeah, this has a lot more, like, there's a lot more to think about. It was interesting to have this conversation with someone who, I won't lie, I have a lot of family that don't have, like, a huge birth of, like, knowledge on film. Yeah, and whenever they see a film that has more, you don't always get that. It was interesting that they were like, all right, this isn't your average heist movie anymore. They're like, this was more. This was a little more than that. There was clear thought put into it. And I'm like, well, yeah, see, it's not just like he took something that is a staple, something that people understand and have an emotion on, and he told it in his own way.
Well, yeah, and that's an awesome thing about him is, like, when I recommend his movies, right, I'm like, oh, Shaun of the Dead, and somebody's like, I hate zombie movies. I'm like, you still watch Shaun of the Dead. You might still love Shaun of the Dead even though you hate zombie movies. Or Hot Fuzz, you're like, oh, I don't like cop movies. I find them, like, cliche. The point of Edgar Wright is he takes what, like, these overdone genres that are, like, completely... I mean, the funny thing is zombie movies have been freaking, like, played out since 2004 when Shaun of the Dead came out. It was 16 years ago, and they're still played out. It's one of those things where I can recommend his movie, and it doesn't matter if you dislike that genre, you might love his movie. And, you might not, and you might just be crazy. Like, they stand on their own as a homage, but also, like, a parody / like, they make fun of the genre while also paying respect to it at the same time, which is a super difficult line to cross. I think, like, maybe Quentin Tarantino might be one of the only other people who can walk that line so well, where you're pointing out the flaws of the genre while also, like, indulging yourself in the genre. But I think Edgar Wright achieves that, which is why, like, I'm not usually a horror or thriller fan. Like, if it's a very, very good thriller that stands out, I'll like it. But if it's, like, more of a horror movie, not really my cup of tea. But his next movie, Last Night in Soho, is supposedly kind of a horror thriller movie, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna see it. Like, it's Edgar Wright, I'm gonna see it. It doesn't matter. I'm sure, like, I hold him to a standard, which kind of, it's hard to execute. It's hard to bat 300 every single time you go to the plate. But I have faith in Edgar Wright to be able to pull off something unique and special.
Yeah, no, I think that's something that, like, I said to you as well when I found out that it was, like, a horror movie. I was like, oh, really? That's interesting. He doesn't usually just do a strict, like, genre film. So I was like, I'm interested. I can't wait to see what this turns out to be. Yeah. And it makes me wonder if he's even going to stick to that. Like, if it's going to feel like a horror movie.
Well, that's the thing. And he has horror, like, I mean, The World's End would, I think, be his most horror-y movie, They're kind of discovering that, like, the town's a bunch of aliens. I guess, maybe Shaun of the Dead. It's hard to...
I think they both have aspects that clearly appeal to that genre of, like, their horror quotation marks. but you can clearly see that both of them were meant to also have this sort of hilarious bender.
Yes.
To like make you have fun rather than be like, oh man, I hope they don't get eaten by zombies.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. A lot of them do get eaten by zombies in Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, but instead of being like, horrified, you're like, well,
Yeah.
which I think is
the characters who get eaten were like the worst people. Like there's the thing in the horror movies a lot where it's like, I mean, yes, the like the jock always dies and stuff or whatever, but it's usually like what the final girl or whatever survives, who's like the innocent one, and then she has to like survive. But in Shaun of the Dead, like they're kind of just all bad, like not great people who you care that much about. I mean, like Shaun is just like this loser, and his girlfriend's kind of like, I mean, she wants him to be better than what he is, and like that's kind of their issue with the relationship, is he's too much of a loser. But then like there's the other guy, and I think one of the only good characters was actually like Shaun's stepdad, Philip, because like he had an issue with Philip because he was like his stepdad, and that's not always a great relationship. But he was actually like in the end he cared about Shaun and stuff, but he still died, and it's like everybody died. What's like just a great scene from a Edgar Wright film that comes to your mind when you just think about his movies?
Narrowing it down to one is hard. That's like asking a lot. I think the montage scene is definitely one of my favorites, and you had to have us read it. I really like the opening scene of Baby Driver, like the opening chase sequence and all that. I really like. I actually really enjoy the final fight in Scott Pilgrim because it's just so much.
Oh, it's so great.
It's, by the way, we didn't talk about that movie at all, and I wanted to talk about how unbelievably, like, what's the word I'm looking for? How it 100% embraces being what it is.
Oh yeah.
And we didn't get to talk about that at all because that movie is like, it wasn't appreciated as much as it probably should have been. So I want to talk about Scott Pilgrim versus the World then, instead of like narrowing it down to my one particular favorite scene. I want to talk about that movie and briefly say it is not afraid to reference and be itself, which is something that is so weird to me because Scott Pilgrim wasn't even that massive at the time. It wasn't like this super crazy beloved like small graphic novel series that like it didn't have this raving fan base like something like a Marvel or a DC or like even something like Harry Potter did. It was so like something that never got in a movie at that time. I don't think it was like going to happen, and instead it did. And Edgar Wright made it feel like it's the graphic novel. I don't know if you've ever read it or read it before.
No, I haven't.
If you've never read it, then all the stuff with like the very like video gamey kind of like stuff happening and the bizarre characters and the absolute insanity that is the entire plot. Guess what? All that was how the graphic novel felt, and that's how the actual movie feels. And that's something that I can't even begin to fathom.
Yeah.
That a director was able to make me feel like I'm reading a cheesy graphic novel. Yeah. And capture all that hilarity and just absurdity at the same time. That's why, yeah.
I was going to say also just a shout out to the movie starring Brie Larson, Chris Evans, Michael Cera, like a bunch of actors who have gone on to become like huge since then. That's
that casting. I'm glad you reminded me that the casting is so good.
Aubrey Plaza's in that. Gosh, yeah, there's a ton of like famous people in that movie. Anna Kendrick, but they were all like super young. Chris Evans is like the best because he's just like the asshole boy.
I just like that movie a lot. Like I know it's probably not my favorite Edgar Wright film.
No, it's
so up there. Though. It's up there. It's not a Shaun of the Dead though, and honestly, it's not Baby Driver either. Baby Driver is just like such a well put together film on top of being so interesting. And I think you mentioned my favorite scene. I want to more say what my favorite like aspect of his films is, and it's the fact that he's able to make me have fun while also like creating something that I at the end of the day would say is art.
Yes,
like if you get what I mean by that.
Yeah, I think I agree 100%. With
because like film is something that like you can tell highbrow. Like we had Hitchcock who he tells a very highbrow type of storytelling. he is a reason a lot of our types of shots like to bring it full circle, why a lot of films are like they are, and why he's had such a huge impact on it. And then we have someone like Edgar Wright, who is definitely he's an artist in the way he creates his films, but also he doesn't compromise on having fun. And that's something that, like, if I want to go to a movie, I want to lose myself in.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't want a Citizen Kane. I want a Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's very important.
Yeah, and I think that's a good note to kind of wrap up episode 3 of the Director's Chair podcast. And I hope you all had a great time joining us here today. And I hope everybody's safe and healthy. And peace out, all.